Strength evolves from defeat. He who has never lost has never acquired new strength. The same applies to Godzilla, even if he is not a mighty human warrior. Godzilla stands as the king of the monsters due to his numerous wins against other kaijus and emerges as the strongest. But even the king sometimes has a hard time dealing with his enemies. Let's explore 6 powerful adversaries of Godzilla who managed to gain an upper hand against him. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. Showa King Gadora. First up, we have King Gadora, the 3-headed monster who first appeared in the titular movie in 1964. Also known as Monster Zero, this kaiju from the Showa era of the Godzilla franchise was designed by Akira Watanabe, based on a combination of Chinese dragons and the Yamada serpent from Japanese folklore. Millenniums ago, King Gadora had destroyed the planet Venus with his intense powers and wiped out the planet's entire civilization in merely 3 days. In 1964, a meteorite crashed in Japan's Kurube Valley, and out came King Gadora from that meteorite. Soon, various cities were destructed with Gadora's fatal gravity beams. Godzilla and Rodan were already clashing when King Gadora was rampaging. As Gadora approached Mount Fuji, Mothra faced him but experienced a backlash. Godzilla and Rodan also entered the battle afterwards, and Gadora was defeated with the combined powers of the 3 Earth monsters. Gadora then flew back to outer space and turned into a weapon for various alien races, but this was not the end for this demon of the galaxy. King Gadora is the arch-nemesis of Godzilla, so naturally he has incredible powers to counter the king of the monsters. His 3 heads are not only scary, but also super intelligent. His rampages are not berserk instincts driven by hatred, he rather enjoys every misery he creates, and his roars resound with mockery and laughter of enjoyment. A clear intellect paired with supernatural strength, agility, and durable resistance to attacks makes him one of the most intimidating villains. With his massive wings, King Gadora can fly in the air or produce incredible gusts of wind, possessing the force of a hurricane. This attack, known as aerokinesis, can blow away buildings and even knock off kaijus from their feet. This gigantic monster may not have powerful arms, but like a T-Rex, he can stump the opponents and bludgeon them with his necks. Brute strength is not his only weapon. Each of his mouths can shoot golden lightning-like beams called gravity beams, which are at par with Godzilla's atomic breath, giving him immense power to cause large-scale destruction and selectively attack his opponents. Frightful King Gadora reappears in Invasion of Astro Monster as Monster Zero. After fleeing from Earth, Monster Zero had been terrorizing Planet X, inhabited by an intellectual alien race called Zillions. When 2 human astronauts arrived on Planet X and they let Zillions borrow Godzilla and Rodan to save their planet from Monster Zero, alas, these ungrateful Zillions unleashed all 3 monsters on Earth to colonize humans and exploit their resources. Zillions had control over the monsters, which the humans severed with special electromagnetic wave technology. The monsters began to fight amongst themselves and got toppled into the ocean. Only King Gadora flew out of the ocean while no sign of Godzilla and Rodan was visible. This is popularly accepted as Gadora's victory over Godzilla. Gadora returns as Mecha King Gadora later in Godzilla vs. King Gadora. In the face-off, Mecha King grapples Godzilla with cables, and they both sink into the sea. Although it is revealed that Godzilla survives while Mecha King is sacrificed, this joust is often hailed as a win for King Gadora. Thus, he bags for himself 2 wins against his massive rival. Mecha Godzilla. Next up is Mecha Godzilla, a robotic monster who first appeared in Godzilla vs. Mecha Godzilla movie of 1974. Since then, Mecha Godzilla has stood next to King Gadora for being a recurrent enemy of Godzilla. Currently, there are 6 distinct incarnations of Mecha Godzilla, but all of them possess some overlapping features. Mecha Godzilla appears in Showa, Heisei, and as Kiryu in the franchise. In the Showa era, aliens from Black Hole Planet 3 built this mechanical beast by intricately designing it as Earth's Godzilla. They intended to conquer Earth as their new homeland with Mecha Godzilla's powers because their Planet 3 was soon to be sucked into a black hole. Mecha Godzilla of the Heisei period was constructed by the United Nations Anti-Godzilla military squad known as the G-Force. They closely studied the mechanics of Mecha King Ghidorah's severed head to build the Mecha Godzilla as their weapon. The original Godzilla, killed by Oxygen Destroyer, became the skeleton for Kiryu Mecha Godzilla. Despite being a robot, Kiryu Mecha Godzilla is much like a biological monster as it was built on DNA computers. All three versions of Mecha Godzilla have some common abilities like artificial intelligence and beam attacks. Mecha Godzilla's primary beam is the rainbow-colored space beam shot from his eyes and later from his mouth, alongside electromagnetic cross-attack beam shot from the shutter on his chest. However, his plasma grenade beam is the strongest. This Mecha Godzilla, living up to its name, possesses numerous missiles in its arsenal with different attacking styles. He can also fly in the air with his jet propulsions while attacking the foe. He also wears strong defensive armor made of materials like space titanium or nanometal. Mecha Godzilla first walked on Earth in the guise of the real Godzilla, but the original arrived to get rid of this imposter. Mecha Godzilla removed the hide and unleashed his weaponry, giving Godzilla a glimpse of death at the cost of his head. The aliens made up for the damage and invaded a second time with Mecha Godzilla 2. Mecha Godzilla 2's destruction was halted by Godzilla, but our king of the monsters suffered yet another defeat and was buried in a ravine. With a twist of events, Godzilla was later able to defeat Mecha Godzilla 2 with his atomic breath and threw him into the ravine in his stead. Heisei Mecha Godzilla was completed in 1994, after which he began facing his organic counterpart in battles. It suffered defeat in its initial jousts, hence the G-Force decided to merge it with Garuda, the initial anti-Godzilla machine. Godzilla managed to overpower it yet again and slammed it onto the ground during a fierce battle sequence. Kiryu Mecha Godzilla achieved what his predecessor had failed to grab. Although it suffered an initial loss in Godzilla against Mecha Godzilla, he soon achieved glory as modified Type 3 Kiryu. When Godzilla appeared in Japan, Kiryu flew towards him for a battle as a teammate of Mothra. Kiryu drilled into Godzilla's chest with his right arm and fired cannons. Groaning, Godzilla was then wrapped up in silk by the twin larvae of Mothra. Having lost his strength, the beast fell onto the ground, giving Kiryu a clear win. Thus, Mecha Godzilla managed to amass 3 wins against Godzilla, the highest among the rest of the adversaries. Space Godzilla. Third on our list is Space Godzilla, a crystalline monster from the Heisei era who first appeared in Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla film of 1994. This malicious monster is a clone kaiju built from Godzilla's DNA. Although there is no definite truth about Space Godzilla's origin, the humans of his debut movie had propounded a hypothesis. Godzilla's DNA had already generated a few of his adversaries, and Space Godzilla is also hypothesized to have been born from Godzilla's cells, which somehow entered the black hole and exited from a white hole. With rapid evolution, these cells assimilated with crystalline organisms under the energy of exploding stars and gave birth to the crystal monster. It is believed that either Bolante or Mothra is responsible for carrying the cells. However, Space Godzilla's codex entry in the Godzilla Defense Force mobile game holds Mothra responsible. Like most kaiju, Space Godzilla has significant strength to counter attacks, and his G-cells provide exhilarated healing. Like King Ghidorah, he is also an intellectual beast who strategizes his moves. In his flying form, he moves at the speed of light in outer space, while being able to shoot corona beam from his mouth, or shoulder crystals or ring-shaped electromagnetic waves called photon hurricane. Crystals are central to his power, without which he would lose multitudinous attacks. Those crystals can create a photon reactive shield that reflects away energy beams. Space Godzilla can also tower crystals from the ground or propel them into the air. He also possesses telekinetic powers like Gravity Tornado that make him hover himself and other kaijus or create a large shockwave. He can also manipulate energy to control the direction of his attacks. A crystal ball floating through space? No, it was Space Godzilla flying towards Earth. The first thing he did upon arriving on Earth was attack Godzilla Jr., but Godzilla instantly came to his rescue and the brawl began. Space Godzilla quickly used his telekinetic powers to overpower his opponent and captivated Junior with his crystals. Space Godzilla then flew to Fukuoka, where he set up his base after defeating Mogera. The two beasts, suffering defeat in the initial brawls, decided to form an alliance. Godzilla and Mogera strategically attacked Space Godzilla and first toppled down his Fukuoka tower before attacking his shoulder crystals. Things took the worst turn for Space Godzilla in this battle, and he escaped by exploding into energy spores. Space Godzilla reappeared in Godzilla Island but suffered direct defeats in the battles against Godzilla. Thus, he earned to his name only one victory. Destroya. Destroya or Destroyer is Godzilla's final opponent in the Heisei series. This crustacean monster first appeared in the Godzilla vs. Destroya movie in 1995. It got its name from the oxygen destroyer chemical weapon that killed the original Godzilla in 1954 and reincarnated this monster as a mutation. In the Precambrian era, microscopic crustaceans existed whose colonies had thrived in anaerobic conditions. When the oxygen destroyer was detonated in Tokyo Bay in 1954, anaerobic conditions were created. Under the chemical exposure, mutation happened in a colony of those 2 billion-year-old crustaceans that had survived into the 20th century. These microbes evolved and then involved microoxygen in its biological process. When Tokyo Bay was disturbed for building the Aqua Line, the future kaiju moved to the surface and fed on organic life. Over the years, the juvenile kaiju aggregated and grew wings to take the perfect form that we know today, although it is not its final form. Destroya causes immense destruction with its numerous powers paired with solid durability and physical strength. Destroya's base form resembles a crab around which numerous creatures were aggregated. Owing to this, Destroya can separate into individual aggregates and reform. Destroya can also seamlessly switch between forms or temporarily separate into multiple copies of its aggregate form to confuse the opponent. Like many kaijus, Destroya also has a beam or ray attack. He can shoot micro-oxygen from his mouth that can penetrate metal and disintegrate organic matter. As he evolved into his aggregate form, his micro-oxygen beam has also evolved into a more powerful purple helix-shaped beam called Oxygen Destroyer Ray, which could obliterate its opponents. In his perfect form, the intensity of the beam also grew to a perfected level that could injure the king of the monsters. Destroya also used this micro-oxygen to drain his opponent's energy by either injecting it directly into the opponent's bloodstream or through his tail. He makes this attack even more effective by absorbing his opponent's DNA after dissolving their cells in micro-oxygen. One more beam attack present in the anime but cut from the movies is his stomach beam, which could be fired from the floral pattern on his chest. The spiked claws of his aggregate form and the pincer-equipped tail of his flying and perfect forms also adds to his immense strength. Besides, the forehead horn of the perfect form can generate energy sharp enough to act like katana, an attack known as variable slicer or horn katana. Destroya can launch balls of energy called oxygen mines, which pull the energy in before exploding. A similar ball of energy is also shot into the air, which then rains down on the opponent like a meteor shower, causing maximum damage. Juvenile Destroya had raided a Tokyo telecom center as human-sized crustaceans, but a few of them were exterminated by a SWAT team who used flamethrowers. The remaining crustacean beasts were cornered by the JSDF in the outskirts of Tokyo, where they united to form the aggregate Destroya and chased the JSDF away. G-Force used Godzilla Jr. to lure Godzilla with an intention to let the two beasts fight and die. Destroya immediately attacked Jr. and infested his blood with micro-oxygen while absorbing his DNA. Although initially overpowered, Destroya returned with his mutated and perfect form. He took vengeance on Junior, and soon an all-out fight broke out between the two beasts. In the first round, Godzilla emerged victorious against the perfect form, but Destroya made a quick comeback in a swarm of his smaller aggregate forms that overpowered Godzilla. The second round began. Destroya again took the perfect form against Godzilla but didn't win. Thus, despite devastating jostles, Destroya had 0 clear wins. Bolante. Bolante, a kaiju born from a modified plant hybrid, was first seen in 1989 in the Godzilla vs. Bolante movie. Her first form is like a giant rose with jaws and vines for attacks. Her head takes the form of a mosasaur or crocodile as the Godzilla genes start to take over, giving rise to the second and gruesome plant form with chiseled teeth, 3 pairs of tusks, and spear-like vines. A scientist named Genichiro Shiragami made a human-rose hybrid by combining his daughter Erika's DNA with that of a rose bush. Several of these roses were killed in an earthquake caused by the eruption of Mount Mihara in 1989. In a panic, Shiragami took the DNA of Godzilla and created a Godzilla human rose tribrid, hoping that the rose would become invincible. Things took an adverse turn when this rose tribrid became sentient and mobile, eventually evolving into a giant monster we now know as Bolante. Bolante is a monster of many abilities with tendrils, energy spores, acidic sap, and whatnot. Being a plant-based monster, Bolante has regenerative power and can tunnel through the ground with ease. Tendrils are a dominant weaponry for Bolante. In her rose form, she defensively used the tendrils to build a wall against Godzilla's atomic breath. Despite being a plant, her tendrils are not tender. These strong tendrils help her to move her 100,000-ton weighing body. These tendrils can also constrict to grab enemies and blind them with a corrosive sap spat from mouthed veins. These tendrils can also take the shape of sharp spears and pierce through enemies. Even if they have a thick hide like Godzilla, her tendrils can also quickly dig through the ground and suddenly rise up in a surprise attack on her opponents. Or she can tunnel her tendrils through the ground and raise them up in a cage formation to captivate her opponents in a green jail. Moreover, as revealed in Godzilla Unleashed, Bolante can also submerge her whole body into the ground and tunnel towards her opponents in a sneak attack. A power that the rose form lacked but the plant form acquired with evolution is the acidic sap. Bolante can spit highly corrosive and radioactive sap from her crocodilian jaws. These saps, which she created by combining diamonds in her head, even gave her an upper hand against Godzilla. This sap remains corrosive even if it is drooled on the victim like blood instead of being spat on. 2 abilities that have earned her the spot of being immortal are her energy spores and the regenerative power. Bolante showcased her regenerative power when she healed and regained the back of her head, which was blown off by Godzilla, and when she literally grew back her core and the vines after Godzilla had incinerated and reduced her to a small, redundant plant. In the face of fatal defeats, Bolante can turn into golden spores or energy particles, breaking her entire body apart. She then ascends into the atmosphere to heal herself, rendering herself insusceptible to death. When the rose tribrid gained consciousness, Shiragami realized it to be the consciousness of his daughter and named it Bolante. Bolante began to cry, which invited Godzilla to her location. On coming face-to-face with the king of the monsters, Bolante whipped out a vine attack in panic, which was met with Godzilla's atomic breath attack. Bolante broke into spores and floated away into the sky, but the atomic breath had altered her cells already. Days later, when she returned, her rose form had evolved into the plant beast form, and she immediately attacked Godzilla. Having the opportunity to capture Godzilla in her crocodilian jaws, he attacked him with her corrosive sap, which intensely weakened him, causing him to retreat. Thus, immortal Bolante bagged 1 clear win against the king of the monsters. Muto Prime. Lastly, Muto Prime is a parasitic titan who was first seen in the graphic novel Godzilla Aftershock in 2019. Muto stands for Massive Unidentified Terrestrial Organism, while Prime refers to it being the parent of the 2 Mutos who fought Godzilla in 2014. Muto Prime is the final life cycle stage of a Jinshin Mushi, commonly called Muto, who is an ancient superspecies that lived alongside Godzilla and the other titans. In Godzilla Aftershock, Dr. Emma Russell theorized that a female Muto would have killed her mate like a praying mantis and evolved into a prime, or the Mutos would have explosively bred until they began to run short of resources. Then they turned on each other, with the lone survivor becoming the prime. Muto Prime can generate seismic blasts by punching the ground or with her sonic roar that causes resonance and seismic instability. Clearly, this monster can manipulate the tectonic plates and fault lines. Even her mighty legs quake the earth when she stumps. With the primary objective of impregnating a titan of Godzilla's species, this creature evolved to become a perfect match for them. She possesses an armored outer shell for protection, and her amphibious nature allows her to escape into the water. Her spiked forelimbs are also strong enough to strike Godzilla down. Her lava-like hot blood further improves her strength. In 2014, Muto Prime emerged from the ground of a United States military base, but soon retired into the hole from whence she came. Earthquakes began to occur frequently. A priest revealed that it is a mythical creature called Jinshin Mushi, or the dragon beetle, Who rises when the Lord of Thunder, Raijin, tires? Muto Prime resurfaced again in the Barents Sea, where she destroyed a Russian nuclear submarine and swam away after punching Godzilla in the face, who had come to take her down. Next, Muto Prime appeared in the Athena 2 nuclear power plant, and Godzilla followed. Muto overpowered Godzilla and knocked him on his back, but Godzilla managed to get the upper hand and forced Muto to retreat. A decisive battle between the Kaijus happened at another nuclear plant, where Godzilla was again overpowered, but eventual win was bagged by Godzilla, who soon tackled back. Thus, even though Muto Prime did not have a clear win over Godzilla, she certainly was a powerful adversary with vague wins. Marvelous verdict. Godzilla's every adversary has put up a great fight, achieving near wins and misses. Bolante's immortality makes her a much more clear-cut winner against Godzilla, although the real winner here is Mecha Godzilla, who has defeated the King thrice. Muto Prime's punches to Godzilla also stand out, but King Ghidorah retains his title of Godzilla's arch-nemesis. Personally, the fights between Space Godzilla were the most engaging. Let us know in the comments which adversaries' fights you enjoyed the most. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.